One of the things I've found about employees today is that we're empowered, but leadership practices have not caught up with us. Now, you might be wondering why Bert is with me. Because for me, Bert is a metaphor of what's wrong with leaders today. I'd just been at one of those leadership away days where they asked me, what is the one word that defines you? And without hesitation, I said hope. And they said, what does that mean? And I said, well, it's a type of hope that thrills you with possibilities. It's the type of hope that picks you up in your darkest hour, gives you a shake, and then propels you into the future. It's the type of hope that has pushed people today to question assumptions, to push past conformity, to chase their identity. I was pretty proud of my word. Hey, I was pretty proud of me, if I'm honest. So I walked into my office the next day, strolled into my boss's office, said, hey. He said, what is your one word? And I beamed and I said, hope. But then he looked at me in such a way that made me feel vulnerable and naive, even stupid. He looked at me in such a way to say, you're never going to make it in the real world. He leant over to me and he goes, you can't sell hope, but you can sell big. That's my word. That's what defines me. Apparently, it's one of our vernacular assumptions. I stood there. I felt like I was trapped in the 1970s. What hope had we for the future if our only ambition is to do what we're already doing, just do it bigger? But ironically, I, for weeks, if not months, believed my boss. I believed that the world I hoped to thrive in would be eaten up by the dog-eat-dog world out there. That's until I went to my favorite bookshop. I went there looking for a book written by an employee, because surely there were people like me who had lost hope in leaders today. What had they done? What can I do? I needed their guidance, but the thing is, I didn't find guidance from people like me because, as it turns out, the only people who write leadership books are leaders or people who study leaders. You see, there's a pattern forming here. And this is where Bert comes in. I watched my boss day after day, holed up in his glass wall corner office, pacing around and around, worrying about forecasts and figures, occasionally looking out on the rest of us, but not really seeing beyond those glass walls. He was as disconnected from the real world as Bert here. The problem with our leadership today is that they're disconnected, and the way they're leading is outmoded. And I wanted to change that because I'm a leader now. I wanted to bring the followers, the employees' voice to the table, so much so that I spent $50,000 of my own money and teamed up with the great Economist Intelligence Unit to find out what was really happening in those glass towers that we pepper Singapore and the rest of the world with. To date, we've collected over 1,000 stories from employees. And we've spent the last 18 months pulling them apart, coding them, putting them together, pulling them apart, coding them, putting them together, because surely the problem cannot be that simple. But according to the experts, it is. Leaders are not listening to their employees, and it's driving them to leave. In Singapore, 85% of middle managers do not rate their leaders very highly. Middle managers, and all of us in fact, want a hand in their future. And if they don't rate their boss, they'll leave. It's not like the 1950s, where we were stuck with the job we were given and stuck with the leader we had. Today's employee is empowered. We're empowered by the World Wide Web, and we're empowered by the options of the global marketplace. Boom! The World Wide Web has changed everything, and I'm sure you've heard that a lot. But it really has. It's empowered us. In fact, it should be called the worldwide hope for employees. It's a manifestation of our empowered hope. It's a growing platform that leads us to hope for better. In fact, it leads us to demand for better. With its infinite connections between individuals and humanity, and its unbridled access to information and ideas worth spreading, the possibilities of our future are exceptional. But leaders, we're not making the office place, the workplace exceptional. In Singapore, according to the research, only 16% of middle managers rate their leaders very highly. Now add that to the 85% who will not fully commit to their jobs. Apologies there, it was 85% who would not commit fully to their jobs, and 16% who do not rate their leaders very highly. And we've got a problem, a big problem, because that makes 100%. And it's a big problem because it's leaving people without hope. It's leaving people without hope for their future. It's a big problem because, yes, it's costing industry billions. But it's a big problem for leaders today because we will not be able to progress with the employees we have. I'm a leader now, as I mentioned before, and I want to do better. Today, according to Deloitte, we spend $140 billion across the globe each year. That's half of Singapore's GDP on leadership programs, books, training, coaches. We're looking for that magic formula. We're studying past employees. We're studying past leaders. We're spending too much time studying the past. We're looking in the wrong place. Where we should be looking is our employees today, because they're the ones that know who they should be, how you should be leading. This word cloud shows us the undiscovered voice of Singapore's employees, the all too silent majority. Interestingly, Singapore wants leaders who are decisive, expert, and empathetic, and this feels contrary to what leadership studies are telling us today. Decisive. Now let's look at those three critical behaviors. Decisiveness. What does that mean? Well, employees today want their leaders to collaborate with them, to help them, to push them forward, so they become part of the people and the solutions they create. Now, this does sound like a far cry from the command and control behaviors of the past. It is a far cry from that, but don't get me wrong. Don't be mistaken into thinking that means your employees don't want you to lead. One of the stories we collected was from David. And he told us about the annoyance he had with his leader because his leader couldn't help him make decisions. He said every time there was a remotely complex decision to be made, he'd get us all into a room, and then we'd debate for hours and hours and hours, rarely getting anywhere. And then by the end of it, he wouldn't lead us to a decision we were all fully committed to, which meant that we never actioned, and it was a waste of time and it's frustrating. So in short, what employees are saying to you is, don't be afraid of being decisive, because collaboration and decisiveness are not mutually exclusive. Make decisions with people and not for them. The second critical behavior is expertise. Now, you might say, that sounds pretty obvious. I show my expertise every day, but according to the employees, you don't. We're too busy managing, apparently. People need you to show their expertise because they need to understand every day and believe every day that they will grow onto you and that they want to grow into you. Now, the importance of that is illustrated by Adrian's story. He tells us about how he lost hope in his leader because she couldn't help him overcome his everyday problems. He told us she lacks judgment. She makes the wrong decision at the wrong time, at the wrong place, for the wrong reason. Every day, your employees are judging you. They want you to be the leader they want you to be. So every day, to ensure that you grow together, you need to either ask employees for their expertise or share yours. Now, before I go on to the third critical behavior, let me share with you a little story. There was a teacher in the UK, and she was a pretty exceptional teacher. She had an unusually good set of kids, and these kids got pretty good grades. They got C's and B's, and they'd worked hard for them, and they didn't break too many rules, so normal teachers would have gone, "No, that's fine, that's great, I'm going to have an easy year." But she actually said, "No, these kids are exceptional, and I can see it, so I'm going to tell them that when you make a mistake, your brain grows bigger." And soon after that, she began to see these kids excel. Why was that? Well, it was because she gave them hope in failure. They no longer feared sacrificing their C's and B's to get A and A pluses and push the boundaries. That's what leaders should be doing, but it is contrary to current leadership thinking. Current leadership thinking says that we have to give permission to fail so that people will innovate. They don't mind trying new things and failing quickly, but then they innovate. But if you think about it, there's no inherent benefit in failure itself, so this permission is in effect meaningless. Leaders need to give their employees hope in failure, but in order to do that, they need to understand their employees' hopes and fears. Which brings me on to the third critical behavior that employees crave, and that's empathy. They need you to be understood by you. They want you to feel that you are listening. They want you to empathize with them. This story is illustrated really nicely by Stephanie's story, who tells us about the time she was Chief Technology Officer. And what happened was the system, unfortunately, failed for 12 whole hours. And she didn't hear anything from her boss, not a call, nothing, a radio silence, no guidance, not even a check-in to say hello. And she said in a really quiet voice to me, "It was the loneliest day of my life." Now, her boss was probably thinking, "Hey, Stephanie's a perfectly capable woman, so I'm going to leave her to her devices. I'm not going to worry her. She's busy." But if her boss understood Stephanie's hopes and fears, then he would have understood that Stephanie needed him to give her hope in failure. Because we know when hope is alive, great things happen. But when it's not, you cannot see the possibility just in front of you. Leaders who give their employees hope command double the loyalty. And they have twice the impact on people's productivity and, most importantly, their happiness. Imagine if you were a leader who went home and you said, "Hey, somebody came up to me today and said, you know what, working for you makes me really happy." Leaders who fill their employees with hope get the very best out of their leaders. And we know that a productive, happy, loyal workforce has a really positive effect on the bottom line. So, with decisiveness, expertise, and empathy, you too can become a leader that employees crave. Let's fill people with hope so they can see the possibilities of the tomorrow. Let's swim alongside them, empathize with them, empower them, so they can become part of the solutions they create. Let's not be like Bert here, stuck in a goldfish bowl, disconnected from the real world. Let's be hope-filled leaders, because we know when hope is alive, great leadership happens. Thank you.